Hi, my name is John Lohman, and I'm the director of the Center for Cultural Vibrancy. We're here in the Coolidge Auditorium at the Library of Congress after an absolutely scintillating performance by the Swanky Kitchen Band from the Cayman Islands. And we're here with Nicholas Johnson and Ms. Paula Scott, Samuel Rose, Karen Turner, who also goes by KK Alice when she's performing, from Cayman Islands. And what an amazing performance. And we're going to talk a little bit about this heritage and this music, but just right when I have you right here, post-performance, I know Sam and Nicholas, that you started this band to help try to preserve this music, and here we are several years later at the Library of Congress. What are you feeling right now? What is your...
I've just been trying to slow down, take it in, and just really comprehend what just happened. It's pretty historic for the Cayman Islands to do what we just did, to put Cayman music on the record here at the Library of Congress. So I'm just feeling so blessed to have just had that performance. Feels good.
Sam, this has sort of been your brainchild, and
yeah, you know, we consider this a tremendous privilege to be able to walk in the footsteps of the torchbearers who started this tradition. It's something that came straight from the first settlers and the slaves who made Cayman their home, and to think that all of those years of tradition have boiled down to this moment, to be able to present something to the world that is unique and culturally significant. You know, we didn't even really know what we were getting into when we started this off in 2003. And this is somewhat of a culmination of all of that. And so we're so grateful that it was deemed worthy of being recorded and performed here in the Coolidge Auditorium of the Library of Congress. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that.
Ms. Paula, tell us about how this has been, taking this music, because this is music that I would say the vast majority of people here in the United States didn't even know existed. And how has it been for you to share it? Would you?
Well, I was roped in the band in 2006, and here I am today. And I realized that when I heard these guys playing, I said, the Greater would sound really good in that band. So I spoke to him, and he gave me an audition. And I got a call some days after, and he said, you're in. And I was really happy for that opportunity to be with Swanky, because I saw the need to keep the culture alive, to keep the culture going. And this is, simple as it looks, it's rare and it's unique. Yeah, it's a kitchen instrument coming from the kitchen, but I make the migrator specifically for the music. So one part is coming from Colombia, this part here that is done in Colombia, and the frame is done here in Cayman. And I treasure it very much, and I just want to see it grow and grow and grow, and to maintain the heritage of our...
I should say, for those of you who are not aware of the Cayman Islands, there's 3 islands.
Yes.
Right, Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac,
Well,
Little Cayman, and you're from Cayman Brac.
Yes, I'm from Cayman Brac, watering place, Cayman Brac. Yeah.
And you came up in this music around. You said the Greater. Is this a sound of your childhood? Tell us a little bit about some of those memories.
Yes, I was actually doing this from small. It just came natural. I didn't think it was a big deal, you know. And I used to see the older folks, and which it made such a beautiful sound along with the drumming. And yeah, and here I am today, just grading away. I never thought that it would take me this far, yeah. And I count it as a great privilege.
Yes, indeed. So this is, and we're going to speak in a moment, but this is kind of the core of this, in some ways, this music. Tell us, Sam, give us a little, just a brief, if you could, just history of what this tradition is. As I said, this is one that was very surprising
Yeah.
to many of us, that this was here, that there was this fiddling tradition coming from the Caribbean islands.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first settlers would have arrived directly or via Jamaica, because we're nestled in the Northwest Caribbean in between Cuba and Jamaica. And so since our first settlers, we've always had fiddles on island. People would have come from either England, Ireland, or Scotland. Some of them would have been shipwrecked. Some of them would have come across from Jamaica to make a home there. And you know what people do, anywhere they are, wherever they move, they bring their traditions with them. And so fiddles ended up across all three islands. In every district there were fiddlers. But then with the arrival of African slaves or enslaved Africans, again, sometimes via Jamaica, sometimes I'm not sure how many would have been brought directly there, but there were also shipwrecks with slaves on record who would have just ended up there, not by choice, or just kind of ended up marooned there. And they brought their rhythm with them. So the drums, in fact, one of the most vivid descriptions of kitchen band music and the instrumentation in them was recorded days after emancipation in 1835, May of 1835. And the celebration was taking place in the district of Bordentown, which was likely then, may have still been the capital, I'm not sure, but I recall that part. But there was a celebration in which it's described as fiddles, banjos, which was relatively new information to me, graters, and drums. And so the sounds of rejoicing drowned out the sounds of the roaring sea next door or nearby. So the music and the musicianship and the instruments have been long documented as part of Cayman. And that definitely sets us apart from other places in the Caribbean. The fiddle culture, there's just many fiddlers, there's photographic evidence of them. What seemed to switch and change, what seemed to have changed was a move away from the banjo to the guitar. Because in my learning, having recent learning, I'm understanding that the banjo is obviously an African instrument first, but it came to the Caribbean and then to North America. So chances are, the calabash grows in the Caribbean very well, the gourd plant. And so the banjos would have been likely homemade, etc. So I'm figuring that when guitars now showed up on the scene, if you had a homemade banjo versus this beautiful, shapely, nice manufactured guitar, the first thing is, I want one of those kind of a thing. So eventually the banjo just disappeared. There's really no one in Cayman who's in living memory who is a proficient banjo player and bringing that to the kitchen band context. So some of the oldest photos will show people with guitars playing. And so there's a lot of, guitar-based music and stuff in Cayman as well too. So it's been interesting to see how these instruments have combined, and just like typical folk music, the songs are about incidents that happen in the community.
We were just at the Lowell Folk Festival together, and one of the stage managers at the dance tent reported to me at the end. She said, this was the first band where she could really hear sort of a European part to it. That she heard that in your music that she hadn't heard in so many of the other, musics that were there, including reggae and others that you all seem to have maintained. So many of the songs that you perform today, the Seafaring song, for example, that could have been an Irish song,
Correct.
Scottish song.
Correct.
And you still have the dances and other aspects, right? So it's still very European, would you say?
Yes, so some of the dances, for instance, the waltz, a kitchen dance or a formal dance, if it was held at one of the town halls, a waltz would have been a part of the formalities. So you'd have the merengues or the things that were Caribbean or Afrocentric, but at some point in time you'd have to hit pause and have a waltz. And then, the gentleman would get up and ask the ladies for a dance, and sometimes they get denied the opportunity, and they'd have to walk back across the hall with their tail between their legs, figuratively. But the quadrille as well was a major dance, and that also has French, European influence. And quadrille is found quite broadly throughout the Caribbean, but there's a bit of a controversy in Cayman because quite often the few communities that still remember the old quadrille steps, they adamantly insist that a lot of the quadrille is being taught in the schools or taught it in dance programs by people who are from other Caribbean islands is not our quadrille, right? So they say those aren't the same steps. And it's very much possible that there would be some different figures utilized, etc. It's just that, again, with it not being recorded, we've potentially pushed that to the brink of existence as well, too. And so you have some individuals who are saying, this is not our quadrille, but then you're struggling to actually demonstrate what our steps actually are. So we have quite a few pressures on our heritage and culture, and so this is why this opportunity to at least put on the record what the music likely would have been. Again, we didn't get any of this passed on to us. We didn't sit at the feet of any of the old masters to learn. We've had to piece it together by listening to recordings that were made of the last great fiddler, Radley Curzon, and the Happy Boys. Without those, I don't know where we would be today.
And that seems to be such a theme of this trip, is about identity, Caymanian identity, about showing the value of it to the world, which then reflects back into your home, and these pressures, whether it's pressures of development, progress, tourism, and also new communities that continue to move in. And one thing I thought was so powerful at the concert was the song that you wrote, House Not a Home, which seems to really speak to that. You want to just talk about that song a little bit and where that came from for you? And
Sure. It was inspired by different events that was happening at home in the community at the time. And I tap into a lot of that. And just one afternoon, I was just thinking deeply about it, and I just sat and wrote the song on a Sunday afternoon. And to me, I just wanted to speak about how, despite all the quote-unquote progress and development Cayman has had, we are struggling with maintaining the integrity of our heritage. We are all accepting, I think, that culture is definitely evolutionary, but I think what we need to strive to do better is to anchor our progress to the heritage that we have come from. So House Not No Home speaks to our seemingly moving away from that idea. So that's what inspired House Not
and
No
also
Home.
literally, right? I mean, there's, visits to Cayman, you see so much land for sale, so much, so much coming in. And,
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful country, a beautiful place to live, and I think the struggle has been welcoming others as well as prioritizing the Caymanians to be have ownership and have a part of the success. And unfortunately, we're seeing increasingly that divide is growing. Unfortunately.
One song that you played today that was so much fun was The Granny, which I know is something that we could relate to here, but it was so fun to hear all the little stories and getting all dressed up for Foster's, which I don't know the audience knew that's the shopping center there in the Cayman. But I know that's a big favorite. Tell us a little bit about that song, The Granny, what inspired that one there.
Well, Samuel penned it, and we've all kind of had our little parts in it. But if you know Caymanian and really Caribbean-wide grannies, they're a force to be reckoned with. And in the Cayman Islands, especially when all the men had gone off to sea and so on, the women really were responsible for just taking care of the families. And so they were strong women. And so the song, one of the taglines in it is to leave Granny alone. So the song talks about all the things that Granny wants to do. If she wants to go to 7 funerals on a Saturday, leave Granny alone. Or if she wants to go, like you said, shopping at Foster's, or to all the grocery stores on one Saturday, leave Granny alone. So it's just, it's you know, it's honoring her, but also putting it in a fun light. But it's a fun song that we get. It's probably the most requested song and the most beloved by not only the ladies of Cayman, but just everyone there.
And you mentioned the men going away. Was that your family history?
My dad went to sea. He was a teenager, probably about 16, and he went to sea for 20 years.
Wow.
And he had 6 siblings that he'd send money home to his mom to help raise them. So, so he came back in his mid to late 30s, and all the women his age had probably been married off by then. So my mom was a little bit younger than he was. But yeah, he was a seaman as well.
Wow.
I loved hearing all of his stories of every ocean in the world. Just been going to every port, and yeah,
Nice.
a lot of hard work in the engine room. He was an engineer.
Oh, that's amazing. I should say that that we met in a very interesting way. Sam came out to the Galax Fiddlers Convention down in Galax, Virginia, which is, I spent a lot of time as the state folklorist down there. What brought that? How do you even know about it, and what was your motivation really to go? And
The motivation was to find the secret to preserving a fiddle tradition. And so I had seen signs before. I have some relatives who live in North Carolina, so I visited them and seen signs to fiddle conventions. And I was like, what is a fiddle convention? Because, you know, in Cayman, I'm the only fiddler, right? So there's no, like, you know, coagulation of fiddlers. There's only one. And so someone explained to me, my brother explained, he said, oh, fiddlers get together and they just hang out and jam. I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. So after COVID, we spent about 2 years locked away in Cayman from the rest of the world because of our size and risk to our healthcare system. We were very conservative in our approach. And I decided, you know, you have a lot of time to think when you're wondering if the world's going to come to an end or stuff like that, and during the worst of it. And, you know, our band couldn't play because, you know, our band is 10 people. That's a public gathering. So we would, just rehearsing would break the law, you know. So we didn't have any music going on for basically 2 years. We were just, you know, talking to each other online all the time and sending jokes and keeping each other cheered up. But there was no venues to perform at. Couldn't really get together much, and we wanted to keep each other safe as well. So my gift to myself post-COVID was, let's do something for yourself, like, you know. So let's try out a fiddle convention, and did my research, and Galax seemed to be the oldest one, so I'm an old soul, so I said, that sounds interesting. I just literally just took a chance, hopped on a plane, flew to Greensboro and drove into Galax, which is about an hour and 40 minutes from Greensboro, North Carolina. And yeah, that's how we did it, right? And I showed up there and started meeting people and telling them about Cayman and fiddle culture there. And I went the next year then, in 2023, and Paula, Karen, Lamy, Christopher, and Devon came with me. And the first tent we showed up to on the Wednesday night, we were jamming with the great Mr. Danny Nicely on the mandolin. We were introduced to Danny and Rex. What's Rex's last name?
Rex McGee.
Rex McGee, yes, right. And Rex on the fiddle, Danny on mandolin, me on violin, Paula on greater, and Devon on the harp. And there was a gentleman in the corner asking all these questions about the Cayman Islands, and tell me about this fiddle culture there, and very intriguing questions. And the gentleman turned out to be none other than Dr. John Lohman. So we struck up a conversation, we kept going, and we were messaging basically all night and into the next morning. And he's like, you know, I need to head back to Charlottesville, but there's a place I'd like you to see called the Blue Ridge Music Center. And I said, guys, let's go. It's just down the road from us. It literally was an 8-minute drive from where we were staying. And we went and got a tour, and that's where I learned so much about the banjo, and you were so gracious to tell us the history of that place. And so for me, it was to discover the formula, and I did, because what I find amazing about the fiddle tradition in America, the old time and bluegrass world, is the enthusiasm with which the younger generation have embraced it. That's the power of it. And so we've been challenged to try and get this going with our younger generation in Cayman, because we have a lot of kids learning classical violin, but not many of them, I can tell you, that's how I learned. I was kind of taught more classically, but it didn't appeal to my soul, and I never ever quit violin, I never ever did. But I can tell you, when this whole opportunity arose in 2003 to keep our heritage alive, there's a part of me that lit up, you know, part of my soul that just kind of, there was a spark there that it hits different, as the kids would say. And I can see how in the old time culture and bluegrass culture, children feel a sense of belonging, they feel a sense of identity with their heritage. And I admire that deeply, really do, and all the keepers of the tradition. So I learned a lot from that, and I would like to, my dream is to see that energy emulated in Cayman, and to get young people wanting to keep our fiddle tradition alive, because it's a part of who they are.
And you would think, just off the hand, you think of somebody from the Caribbean coming to Galax, you think there'd be no commonalities there. But musically, I mean, what you're describing, this history that you've laid out for us so beautifully, is really this, it parallels, of course, the history of old time and bluegrass, and basically the core of all music here in the United States, that collision between the European and the African. So it's really a very parallel tradition. In terms of the actual fiddle style, when you hear those, old time music and bluegrass music, do you hear, I mean, what do you feel sort of alike, and what's kind of distinctive, would you say, about Caymanian fiddling from Mr. Radley? That something distinct about the style that makes you hear it and say, oh, this is Cayman.
One of the fiddlers in Galax came up to me and said, he described it as rhythm fiddle. Like you have rhythm guitar, and bluegrass is more like lead, right? Because it's very melodic, virtuosic, etc. Now, old time and our traditional music are much closer than bluegrass and our traditional music, because it's kind of like a few little lines played over and over again, right? And so, to be very, it is what it is. The style of our traditional music was quite rudimentary. There wasn't a lot of development of melodies. So there would have been a few little words kind of repeated over and over again, or a few little tunes, not with the same structure that bluegrass and old time is structured. So in fact, sometimes it didn't really follow any kind of pattern or structure per se. It was just pretty basic. So there's one song that Mr. Radley plays called Balimba, and the whole song is literally this, and they probably played it for a very long time. So it was and that's all it is, right? Like over and over again. But you have other songs that had a little bit more of a melody to it. So he played this one called Lucy Beat Matilda and Her Daughter. So a little something like that. So that's a little more, I wouldn't say complicated, but it has a few more notes than the first one, right? And then the waltzes tend to be a little bit more melodic. They tend to be more of a song, so they're kind of playing the melody along with it. So, obviously, Mr. Radley also liked bluegrass. We're learning that, of late. So a lot of the songs that they did the quadrilles to, they call them figures, were actually bluegrass or old time songs. So I watched him explain something in a video that he played the Battle of New Orleans is one of the songs he performed at the Opry, right? So, you know, I mean, people know that, but he played it. It was a... So, Battle of New Orleans, and so I heard him play this song, and I didn't know where it was from, and all of a
Right.
sudden, so they had influences as well. They had
Sure,
AM
sure.
radio, and they listened to those things.
Yes, I know country music, I know, is very popular.
Very.
You hear it all the time, all the time, especially old country music, right?
Yeah.
So you have this very rhythmic thing, and then of course the grater, which is such a unique aspect to this music. I mean, how did you pick it up, Ms. Paula? You said you did as a child. Do you come from a family of musicians? Or?
Yes, drummers, guitarists. Yes, this actually came natural to me. I remember as a child cutting off my mother's plants, make some sticks to beat some old buckets, and I would be listening to the band playing upstairs, which was just by our house, and I would also then have the grater, and I would take that out and I would grate. I said, I just want to play with those guys. I just want to play with those guys. And I was always intrigued with the drumming, especially, and the grater. Yeah, and I love the bass too. But I remember as a child hearing the kitchen dance strike up. When you hear the drum, that's the call, we're going to strike up, we're going to have a kitchen dance. And there goes the grater, the fiddles, and the drumming, and the guitars, and the violin, of course. And it was awesome. But that grater did its part big time. Yeah,
It really just cuts through,
yes.
you know, everything with that rhythm. And in the drumming, it just seems very interesting too. You talked quite a bit about Aunt Julia during the show, was a drummer.
Yes.
And the way I always found the way that she holds the sticks kind of interesting. Is it somewhat unique to the area, isn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely a
It's clean,
traditional
natural.
style. Yeah, they
Yeah.
put the stick kind of through they hold the stick kind of like this through the index finger, and they kind of play very upright. So a lot of African traditions, they play the drum with their hands, but it was a stick tradition. And for some reason, if you look at the pictures, all the old drummers are holding the stick kind of like this, you know. Now people are being taught more conventionally now, and you know, getting lessons, and they're seeing how other people play. So that style is kind of disappearing. But that was, you know, they made their own drum out of goat skin or cow skin, and they had something on the side to give a more clicky sound, you know, almost like a hi-hat, I guess. You know, sometimes it hit the sticks together
Yeah,
and hit the drum and the stick at the same time, and it had a feel of like a march.
Yeah,
To it,
that's
very
what I
marchy.
hear.
Yeah, like a very
It's
marchy.
like a march, you know.
Right.
marching band.
Right.
You all are what I've been so impressed with too, are the way you seem to, your concerts, you know, they get very traditional, and that's such a part. But then you add so much of yourself to it, and you know, original compositions, and then you also talk about that you swankify?
Swanktify.
Swanktify.
sanctify.
Music that you're hearing now, right? So your concerts kind of run the gamut.
Yeah, we like to show a broad range from the traditional to the modern influences of music, how our music sounds when you put those things together. Because the age range in the band, I think, is like we're from like 20 something to like 70. So when you put all of us together in a room and we're trying to come together with a song or interpret something, you're going to get all of our different musical influences bearing on that. And so when we're producing our own songs, that definitely comes to fruition in our music. And I think it makes it interesting for the audience. So they get to hear the foundation of the music, but then they get a taste of where it can go, and it helps them to sometimes better connect to our music as well, because it's like, oh yeah, I recognize that, or that's something that's I've heard before. As well as Samuel spoke about getting the youth involved, it kind of encourages them to say, well, yes, I need to learn the foundations, but hey, I can still do like a remix to like a Taylor Swift song or something, and in kitchen band music style, and so it helps to create that enthusiasm for the genre.
How's it been for you, this tour, performing this? Did it meet your expectations in terms of how
Yes,
did you think people would receive this music from these three little islands?
Well, it has exceeded, I think, my expectation. I mean, I came with high aspirations for it, but the reception that we have been receiving so far has just been immense and so encouraging, and I think it is going to ignite, I want to say maybe a renaissance or a revolution in Cayman for the kitchen band music genre, because in some instances, I think as a people as a whole, we know what our music is, but we probably don't appreciate the specialness of it, especially when you break it down and compare it to others, how unique it is. And I think this tour has been a great opportunity for us to underpin that acknowledgement and recognition of the importance of our music, and as Sam said earlier, tying it back to identity. Because as I spoke about earlier, House None a Home, with how the island has changed, what has been the casualty of a lot of that is a lack of identity for Caymanians. Like, it's amazing how when people recognize us at home, what they'll say is, Swanky Kitchen Band, that's what it means to be Caymanian. So expressions like that are what keep me and the band motivated. Yeah.
This interview is going to go into the archives. I know that part of the motivation here was that while there's so much recorded music and interviews from all over the Caribbean, but somehow not the Cayman Islands. So we are rectifying that today. So this is this performance that was filmed today. These interviews will be in these hallowed halls for generations. So Nicholas, what do you hope? What do you hope people will see? What do you hope they come away with?
Really,
understanding of this culture.
I think of the youth mainly that will see this. My children, who are a teen and a 20-year-old, and possibly their children, and all the children in Cayman, to say, look, I hope it's opened some doors for people to be inspired to get to places like this, and to know that their traditions, their music means something. So I don't think I've completely fathomed everything. I don't think it's all hit me yet. I'm just excited to see what happens from this. But
Sure.
it really is exciting to know that people will be able to look into the archives, go and look at the videos, watch videos like this and the performance, and be inspired by it.
That's great. Sam and I have spoken about this quite a bit, that this idea that sometimes traditions, over time, it's almost can be like an hourglass in a way. Like, we were talking about this music that, do you hear the drums to strike up? It's a kitchen dance. So everyone's doing it, and then as time goes, less and less and less, sometimes less people. And sometimes it may just come down to one little grain that if then, people see it and they get excited about it, and young people say, I want to do that too. And we get some educational programming going, maybe some apprenticeships going, and places to play, and the places in Cayman, you have such you're so fortunate in that it's a place that has resources and it has a steady stream of people who are hungry for culture that hopefully that will fan out again. And, you know, I think that, you know, Swanky is that grain of sand. You really are. And it's such a important thing that you all are doing, not just making beautiful music, but that you had the wherewithal to say, hey, this is this tradition that is just going to die out unless it's actually enacted and it's actually live and happening, and then infusing it with your own energy. So we are grateful.
Thank you.
Grateful.
I want the record to show that there was a period in the timeline of the Cayman Islands, and I don't know who'll be watching this and what year it'll be when you're watching this, but there was a period in time in the timeline of existence and life in the Cayman Islands when there was a tradition and a group of people who committed themselves to protecting that tradition. And we had to partner with people who weren't from the Cayman Islands, who saw value in this and encouraged us, along with people from the Cayman Islands, to keep it going. There have been times when it felt like a burden, like we were lifting up impossible weight. There was very little traction at times. There were times where we kind of felt they were just playing to four walls. But it's turning, and with the help of people like Dr. John Lohman from the Center for Cultural Vibrancy, Dave Martins, who gave us the idea, to our various government ministries, it now feels like we have people who are now lifting us on this journey. So we have nothing to fear if we can survive the onslaught of change in our heritage and culture if we embrace and appreciate and respect our Cayman traditions. So this is our contribution to the future.